My God. Hi, everyone. Yes. Nice to welcome you for this panel. I'm so sorry for the acoustic, but we'll do our best to speak loudly. But we have strong competitors next door, right? Yes, so welcome to this panel to talk about science to shape a climate-smart and nature-positive financial system. And I'm very honored to be part of the launching of the very unique CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance. So let me introduce you to Juan Lucas Maslupo, for who do not know him yet. So he's Director General of the Alliance, Global Director, Partnership and Advocacy at CGIAR, and will do some opening remarks for us today.
Thank you, Dominique. Good evening to all. It's great to see you here. I want to start by excusing our Managing Director, Dr. Claudia Sadov, that was very committed to launching this Sustainable Finance Hub. Given it's a very important venture and shows what one CGIAR can do, but unfortunately she was caught up in a ministerial meeting, so I'm going to be reading her introductory remarks on her behalf. It's a great pleasure to be here today to launch the CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance. As we are all aware, the window of opportunity to curb climate change and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals is closing rapidly. CGIAR has responded to this challenge and begun an ambitious transition aiming for greater integration and impact in the face of interdependent challenges facing today's world. This integration requires a dynamic reformulation of knowledge, assets and partnerships with new types of actors. This is very new for CGIAR to speed up the transformation of food, land and water systems. We also understand that the global finance community, and thanks for being here, some of you from that community, need to urgently come together to finance our transition to a net zero and climate resilient food system. However, climate-smart investments are not yet at scale. We need to address the numerous challenges to unlocking private sector capital from food and ag companies and investors. This requires integrating ESG risks into financial institutions' risk appetite frameworks. It needs clearer guidance in the form of standards and regulation, stronger incentives for farmers so they are rewarded for the positive impacts they generate, and above all, new non-traditional partnerships that can accelerate change. CGIAR is committed to playing a key role in developing these new ambitious partnerships and harnessing sustainable finance to deliver research that directly supports new investment and funding models. Under a CGIAR engagement framework for partnerships and advocacy that we have been building, the CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance has been set up to mobilize our state-of-the-art research capacity, our knowledge assets, and our global networks and footprint to work with the sustainable finance ecosystem and respond to their challenges to unlock capital for SDG impact. We look forward to showcasing the progress of this new and critical area of work for us, as will be highlighted in the presentations to follow. To finalize, we would like to thank our key partners, starting with the Federal Republic of Germany and GIZ for supporting a project that's making all of this happen, which is the institutionalization of sustainable finance within CGIAR. We're excited to work with all of our partners from the financial sector to build a climate-smart and nature-positive financial system that it can be shaped by CGIAR science and evidence. Let's then hear from the experts, enjoy this launch, and we look forward to working with you. Thanks.
Would like to welcome now Annette Windmeister, Head of Climate Finance Division at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Annette, welcome. She's going to explain to us what is the food system strategy and the role of sustainable finance.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for receiving me here and giving me the opportunity to speak. Despite all the difficulties, I really appreciate our energetic youth, the youth of the world making itself heard. That's great, but sometimes a little inconvenient. On the other side, we have the private sector making itself heard. Also that, very welcome, also a little inconvenient. Ladies and gentlemen, Jean-Lucas, thanks very much for your opening remarks, and I'm very happy to give the keynote speech here tonight on behalf of the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the BMZ, and to help launch the CGIAR together with you for sustainable finance. We come together under extremely difficult geopolitical circumstances, as we all know, and even more than in the last already challenging years, the situation has deteriorated a lot, especially for people in the global south, and still ongoing pandemic and its aftermath. The Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine leads globally to devastating consequences for energy and food supply. The transformation towards climate resilient and crisis resistant agri-food systems is thus more urgent than ever. It is crucial for achieving the SDGs and the goals established under the Paris Agreement. Germany is strongly determined to contribute to this transformation. Our ministry's core area strategy on the transformation of the agri-food systems sets the foundation for bold actions in the three areas of interventions: food and nutrition security, rural development, and agriculture. We work for agri-food systems that are climate adapted and low in emissions, that are based on renewable energies and regional and local material, water and nutrient cycles, that actively protect agrobiodiversity and thus contribute to food security worldwide. But figures speak for themselves. According to the OECD, only 9% of climate finance provided and mobilized by developed countries in 2013 to 2020 spent on mitigation and adaptation action in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries together. We must work together on increasing the level of climate finance and on improving access to it at the same time. We know of the many complaints we hear from developing countries having difficulties accessing climate finance. And we do very much appreciate that. And the money needs to be channeled where it is most needed, and those who are the most vulnerable need easier access to it. We are working intensely with the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, and the GCF particularly, to make this access easier and less bureaucratic. Also, Germany is committed financially. In 2021, we just released our figures. We invested 8.1 billion euros in climate finance. That's the overall figure. Of that, 5.34 billion euros came from our budget. And our Chancellor just here on Tuesday announced that we are going to increase the climate finance from our budget to 6 billion by 2030. 25. And also particularly important for this event tonight possibly is that we already achieved a balance between adaptation and mitigation finance. We are striving very hard to keep that over the next couple of years. So we're trying to be a reliable partner as well as one of the largest climate finance donors. However, we need to stress that the costs of climate change mitigation and adaptation are too high to be financed by public resources alone. In order to close steadily growing investment gaps for mitigation and adaptation, we must engage with the private sector more strategically. A deep transformation requires a systemic shift in financial flows. Finance flows need to be leveraged and reoriented towards a low-emission and climate-resilient development pathway. Our role is to support our partners in their initiatives towards this goal, and by setting adequate regulatory framework conditions, including climate-sensitive fiscal policies, strengthening public actors involved in promoting financial vehicles and products that are attractive from the investors and the societal perspective. In the same context, under the German G7 presidency, our ministry has recently launched the Compens Action Initiative to promote innovative payment mechanisms for ecosystem services that attract public and private funding and expand opportunities for smallholder farmers to increase their income and to incentivize good agricultural practices. We see international agricultural research in a position to make an important contribution to international climate finance by developing science-based approaches for leveraging finance flows and reorienting them towards low-emission and climate-resilient agri-food systems. Germany is a long-time supporter of CGIAR. The topics addressed in the new CGIAR Research Strategy 2030 cover key elements to achieve a food-secure future in increasingly fragile and risk-prone environments. These are aligned with German policy, priorities and actions, which are framed by the Sustainable Development Goals as well as the Paris Agreement. To achieve these ambitious goals, innovations need to go beyond technical solutions and include systemic approaches to transform our agri-food systems in a sustainable and socially inclusive manner. These innovations do not only need to be economically feasible, but also need to be backed up by the appropriate financing. Germany is therefore supporting the CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance to play a strategic role within CGIAR in transforming the financial ecosystem. We are excited about this new step forward and want to help to generate positive measurable social and environmental impact. We hope this model will provide a blueprint for others to replicate and amplify further the agri-food system transformation. So with this, I think the technique actually just gives me the signal I should stop here. Thank you very much and have a great evening.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Annette, for this very nice presentation. So I want to give the floor now to Godefroy Grosjean, who is senior partner within CGIAR Sustainable Finance, who will introduce to us this newly created Hub for Sustainable Finance, which is, in my opinion, a key initiative to unlock capital towards the benefits of food system.
Thank you very much, Dominique, and thank you very much, Annette and Juan Lucas, for the opening remarks and keynote speech. It's a real pleasure to host you all here. Thank you very much for joining the launch of the CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance. But let's see if that, oh. Okay, so okay, let me go on with this slide. Our food systems are at crossroads. On one hand, food systems contribute heavily to climate change. On the other hand, they are highly exposed to the impact of climate change. When you look at the figures, you see that about a third of our emissions come from food systems. And food systems are a main driver of biodiversity loss. But at the same time, smallholder farmers in the global south are heavily, and in other regions, are heavily impacted every day by climate change. But what we see is that out of the climate finance that is being tracked, only 1.7% of all of it is targeting small-scale agriculture. Although in the global south, smallholder farmers represent about 80% of the food production. So there is a clear mismatch between the needs on the ground to transform our food systems and the current financing stream that is helping them adapt and become more resilient. And this funding gap is estimated at around 300 to 350 billion a year that are needed to transform food systems to make them more resilient to climate change. And that's exactly the reason why we set up OneSF, the CGIAR Hub for Sustainable Finance, to be your global science partner for a climate-smart and nature-positive financial system. Next slide, please. Okay. So OneSF is really at the forefront of two transitions that we are seeing happening. The first one is the food, land, and water system transition, and that's what I mentioned earlier. We need to transform our food systems to make them resilient to the impacts of climate change and to mitigate the emissions. But at the same time, what we see is that there is a sustainable finance transition. So ESG is becoming more and more essential and embedded in business models. But though this is the case, what we see is that there are still high challenges for many actors to implement ESG due to the costs, the data that are missing, and very often they lack the tailored advisory they would need to make that transition happen. And that's exactly what we are catering to with OneSF, and our vision is to become a reference within the food, land, and water systems transformation, focusing on three key areas of work. The first one is to support risk assessment and mitigation. The second one is to work around ESG strategy, working with actors to develop science-based and evidence-based ESG strategies, and finally, evaluating the financial impact of these. Next slide, please. And we do that through three key areas of work, three levels, so to say, that we work in. The first one is what we call the ecosystem level. So it's really about generating evidence and data to facilitate systems transformation, working with regulators, with financial actors. The second one is working on the demand for capital side, or solutions, strengthening the pipeline of bankable projects. And I will go to that in a few seconds in more details. And finally, we also work on the supply side, with the supply side of capital. Next slide, please. But let me start with our work at the ecosystem level. What we observe as market challenge is really that there is a lack of common understanding of what ESG-related investments are about. The reporting, the standards, regulations are still unclear in many instances. So what we are doing is And that's, again, one of the reasons why we set up OneSF, is to use CGIAR science, data, and also presence in more than 100 countries to develop a unique risk and impact framework, which is based on data production, transformation, to really develop market-driven product and services. And one example of that, a concrete example, is the OneSF analyzer that we are showing here officially for the first time today, which is a tool that we're working on to work with SMEs, farmers, investors, so that they can assess the risk of the investment, potential solutions to respond to these risks, and then quantify the impact of those solutions and the financial return. What we're going to present today is the first module of the OneSF analyzer, which really focuses on risk assessment. And in the future, we will develop further the other modules on impact assessment and return. Next slide. So let me show you a video that presents and gives some insight on the OneSF analyzer.
Here we present to you the first module of OneSF Analyzer, which looks specifically at agroclimatic and environmental risks using state-of-the-art science. The successive modules will build off the risk assessment to offer risk mitigation recommendations, associated impact, and return quantification services. OneSF Analyzer will be developed and extended across multiple geographies together with partners. Here is an example for Ghana. The data and insights presented here are for illustrative purposes only. After selecting a country, the end user will be directed to a map with climate hazard scores, which have been calculated by summarizing 30 years of daily historical temperature and precipitation data produced by the CGIAR. The user can disaggregate the climate hazard score by hovering over individual cells. Upon selection of an area of interest, a panel appears on the right that provides a summary of climate hazard scores. The user will need to select a specific crop of interest from the drop-down to populate the radar chart at the bottom. The radar chart consists of 4 indicators representing both biophysical and reputational risks: the average historical climate hazard score, long-term forecasts for water scarcity, the average risk for yield, and risk for loss in biodiversity intactness. The results compare the selected location with relevant benchmarks. In this illustration, we use the national average, although in the future, other indicators or benchmarks could be developed depending on the partner's needs. The user can get into the details of the computation and its results by clicking on the View Details tab. In this illustration, we highlight line plots showing historical and estimated data for yield risk, which can also be disaggregated across the selected area by toggling to the map view on the right. The user can use the slide button above to view the yield risk estimates across 2, 5, and 10-year time periods. Along with the View Details tab, the user can also compare the results for the same crop across multiple locations through the Save Selection tab. The user can then click on the individual selections to compare. This will generate a compare and summary page that will showcase the results for the 2 selections across the 4 indicators. In general, investors, SMEs, and farmers can have different risks, impact and return appetite, and materiality levels. As a next step, we want to work with you to tailor a range of indicators and associated benchmarks that can be used to define the investment decision criteria per individual actor needs.
Thank you. Next slide, please.
Here we present to you the first module of
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So, solution like OneSF Analyzer are the backbone of the services and products we are providing to actors on both the demand and supply side of capital. So now let me go dive a bit into the work we do with the demand side of capital. The market challenge there is clear. There is a lack of bankable projects, and especially in the food sector, and investors who are here can easily confirm that. So what we're doing is to strengthen the pipeline of bankable projects and work with businesses to advise them to make their business more sustainable, link them with investors, and in the future also do pooling based on their risk-return profile. So, for instance, in the last year, we developed and implemented accelerator programs across Africa and Latin America, and we worked with more than 300 businesses, together with partners like AECF, the African Enterprise Challenge Fund, Week Capital, the Accelerate for Impact platform, and others. And we're really looking at scaling that in the future to build that pipeline of bankable project. Next slide, please. On the supply side of capital, what we see as a key market challenge is very often the perceived unattractive risk-return profiles of investments in the food sector. So what we are doing is working with private investors to co-design investment vehicles that de-risk their investments and also help mobilize finance to support the food systems transformation. And we do that by working with investors on co-designing funds, and also providing pre and post investment technical assistance. One of flagship activity on this is the work we've been doing with responsAbility, co-designing a 200 million climate smart food system fund, which is the first science-based food system fund in the market. And my colleague Mauricio Benitez will go more into the details in a second, so I will not go into more details for now. Next slide, please. So now, in a nutshell, OneSF is working with a range of actors. On the demand side, working with farmers, supply chain actors, and tailoring products and services for these, as well as on the supply side, working with banks, insurance, and investors. But what is really in our DNA is to be receptive to market needs and market demand, so that we can anticipate the needs and see how, as a scientific organization, we can fill the gaps by bringing our analytical capacities and the data we have access to and we're collecting across the globe. So that's more now a call for you here. If you're interested in going in this journey further with us, we will set up a market demand steering group composed of representatives from the private sector and private investors to really help us better anticipate market needs and respond to that with our technical capacities. So I stop here. Thank you very much again for joining us today. And you can reach us, next slide please, on our emails here, my emails and email from Richard Newman, who has been co-leading this initiative with me and was not able to join today. But thanks a lot.
Thank you, Godfrey, for this excellent presentation. In fact, we can share the presentation for those of you who are interested to get it. I think it's worth having a look, a deeper look at it. So if you like to receive the presentation, I suggest that maybe you put your business card outside and we'll make sure that the presentation is being sent to you. So I definitely encourage you from the financial sector to have a deeper look at it, because it's really key that the financial sector gets closer to associations like these associations who can provide huge amount of data and expertise that are so needed to make sure that the financial sector evolves in the right direction in terms of compliance and in terms of business positioning. So I'd like now to welcome Maurizio Benitez from responsAbility Investments AG, who is going to talk about insights and lessons learned, from the Climate Smart Food Fund that you set up. Yeah.
It's working now. So thanks a lot first to BMZ, the Climate Shot Investor Coalition that we are part from, and is sponsoring this as well. And yeah, to CGIAR, our partners in this fund. We are, for allow me to introduce you and present our experience designing this fund and approximately being able to invest. Some problems, okay. So some figures on responsAbility to put some context on the fund. So we are an asset manager based in Zurich, relatively established, relatively large for the industry. We are focusing on our impact themes in three sectors, financial inclusion, energy, and sustainable food. In sustainable food, we have disbursed about 2 billion in the past 10 years, which I was the head of portfolio. And since over 2 years, I've been working exclusively with the CGIAR on this fund that is coming. We're present globally, and we invest only in the global south. The fund is a bit scary. Don't worry. This is to say that we're across the food system. We have identified a market opportunity serving SMEs in emerging markets, long-term debt, in the missing middle that we could say between impact investors and DFIs. What is innovative about the fund is that we are integrating climate finance aspects like mitigation, adaptation, across the food systems through advisory, science-based advisory, pre-investment and post-investment with the support of the CGIAR. And this is across the food systems, whereas normally previous, or in general, climate finance funds, they focus on primary production, agroforestry, and so on. So this is the very first fund that is climate finance, food systems, and science-based. Another aspect that is innovative is the blended structure. Again, a bit scary just to say that it's a complicated fund, but it is designed to really work on the perceived and real risks of investing in long-term debt in emerging markets, in SMEs, in agriculture. So for that, we have a junior tranche that is composed basically from governments. BMZ was the anchor investor. And soon we will have others as well. We also have a very innovative unfunded guarantee that serves as a mezzanine tranche, which is complementing this protection for senior investors. Senior investors are commercial investors in the sector. There are DFIs there as well, but also private investors like Bank of America. Together, these 200 million will be supported by a technical assistance facility of 10 million that will be advised by the CGIAR, and it will fund the pre-investment and post-investment science-based advisory envisioned together in the design. What we will do to be truly a blended structure is we will go and fundraise from private investors, truly institutional investors that will give us money on notes. They will benefit from a very serious cushion, but it's the only way, honestly, to attract institutional investors in this industry. The impact proposition is interesting for investors because like dollar to dollar, this is very interesting on the mitigation side, which is, again, for every dollar investor is providing investors more mitigation potential with regards, for example, to renewable energy funds. Why? Because we will really work with soil. And also by working with farmers, we will be able to target adaptation targets, which, as it was presented, is something clearly missing in climate finance. And lastly, since we're going to work with infrastructure, logistics, and warehousing, we will be able to attack food loss, which is a climate problem as well. And lastly, but equally important, from the beginning, we've been working on a gender lens strategy for the fund. This is to integrate in the fund how we invest considering gender aspects. And it starts from the responsibility as investment manager, the fund, but particularly on the investees, we're targeting to be 2x challenge compliant, meaning that a minimum of 30% of the investees will have to comply with, or we will work with them so they can comply with targets on gender equity, entrepreneurship, leadership, and employment. But particularly we will go at the farmer level together with the CGIAR and not only provide advisory and climate smart practice, but they will be gender responsive climate smart practices. So to improve participation of women, but also adoption of practices. This has been closely developed and supported by Global Affairs Canada, which is, we're working together to be one of the main supporters of the fund, junior tranche, senior tranche, but also the technical assistance. And this is just for you to give you an overview, and very happy to be here again. And any question, please. It's very difficult to fill the gap between 12 hours of walking and the drinks, but probably we will have a good time to exchange later. So thanks.
Thank you very much. So, can we, yeah, okay. I invite the panelists to come on stage now. Yes? Good. Voila. So, yes, you can. You sit there if you like. Yes. Okay. I'll sit at the. Okay. Very nice. Yes. Voila. Okay. I see. I will. Oh, I see. Ah, yes. We need. Yeah. We need. Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Right. Good. So we have today with us as panelists Abid Karmali, Managing Director, Climate Finance at Bank of America. Mariam Gill, Director for Sustainable Development and South Cooperation at Crédit Agricole du Maroc. Corey Van Gaal, Deputy Director of the Food Systems Finance Program from Global Affairs Canada. And Andy Jarvis, Director for the Future of Food, Bezos Earth Fund. Welcome to all of you. If you don't mind, I'd like maybe to start with Abid for the questions, because he has a very important event that he has committed to. So, Abid, I mean, what would you say about the objective of mobilizing the private sector towards investing into sustainable finance? What would motivate them? And why, as Bank of America, have you decided to invest into climate smart agriculture? What were the drivers for that?
Thanks very much. And yeah, my apologies if I have to dissipate a little bit early. You know, the theme of climate smart agriculture is very much aligned with this focus on food security, which we knew that at Bank of America we could only address through blended finance, in part because, we're learning as we go. We recognize that, we don't have the kind of expertise that exists in organizations like CGIAR, but also because, we see this as a clear fit within our broader net zero by 2050 strategy, our commitment to mobilize 1.5 trillion by 2030 in sustainable finance. And in the blended finance area, we have had some experience in this particular segment. We were an early investor in the Insure Resilience vehicle, the debt fund. So that gave us an exposure to how one could achieve impact for smallholder agricultural communities through microinsurance. And in addition, we were an early investor in the ABC fund, which is really focused on strengthening the so-called missing middle across the agricultural value chain in emerging markets. So, and full disclosure, we had previously invested in a responsAbility fund, but in a different theme, in energy access. But all of this came together in the sense that we were comfortable with the type of structure. We knew that there would be sufficient de-risking coming from the public capital. We had an experienced fund manager in the form of responsAbility. We had comfort with the experience in the prior funds. And we wanted to improve our own allocation to climate resilience because, like much of the conversation in this building over these 2 weeks, a lot of it is going to be focused on what is it that the private sector can do in the space of climate resilience. And for us, agriculture, the food system, was the perfect place to start because of the issues that you outlined, that it's highly vulnerable and it links in so closely with the broader climate, nature, water agenda.
And regarding the association, you're a member of TNFD, for instance, nature-based related disclosure. I mean, what kind of role would you see for an organization like CGIAR in driving some of the protocols or assessment matrices for the financial community and corporate?
Yeah, so it's, TNFD, some of you may be aware, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures plans to release its market-ready framework by September 23, so less than 12 months from now. Just on Friday, before COP started, we had the release of the third beta version. The work on metrics, on risks, opportunities, dependencies, impacts is very much a work in progress, and it's an open source approach that the task force is taking. It recognizes it doesn't have all the answers. It's seeking inputs from the private sector, from financial institutions, from corporates, from NGOs, and from specialized scientific organizations, some of whom it works within a formal partnership. But I think from even just your little presentation here, it seems clear to me that there's a certain granularity of data that you and others at CGIAR have that probably don't exist yet in the public domain, or at least they're not well known in the public domain. And so there's a really important need to somehow make sure that this becomes part of the slipstream, if I can call it that, so that as the TNFD develops metrics, the work that you're doing can really help guide companies and financial institutions to choose the most appropriate metrics to ensure they're having the right kind of impact, whether it's a simple product, a bond, a loan, a supply chain product, a trade finance product, or whether it's a blended fund in aggregate, as we've seen with the responsAbility fund.
Thank you, Abid. Thank you very much. For those who have questions for Abid, please feel free also to give us your business cards. Then we will provide you with the contact of Abid, and it will be a pleasure for him to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Abid. Thank you. Right. So I guess that now we continue with the questions. So, Mariam, I mean, as within Crédit Agricole du Maroc, I mean, what are the issues that you're seeing when you want to invest or provide finance in the sustainable finance area? What are your issues? What are the bottlenecks? What do you have to consider? What are your main worries when you are doing this?
Thank you, Dominique. So, first of all, maybe I would like to say that Crédit Agricole du Maroc is actually a public bank in Morocco specializing in agriculture. So we're the main finance provider for farmers, including smallholder farmers. So it's very important for us to make sure that we contribute to providing transformative finance for them and to helping them to adapt to climate change. So by doing this, one of our main constraints is actually to convince them and to try to bring them to change their practices. For example, we've been working on innovative financial products since 10 years, and actually we've noticed that if you want farmers to change their practices, you really need to work with them on the field to convince them. You need to provide technical assistance, and you need also to provide incentives, not only debt, but also technical assistance. This is very important to show what kind of practices they have to adopt, taking into account their specific constraints, local constraints. And then you need also to incentivize the loan that you're giving, because otherwise they will not be willing to take the risk to change their practices. So this is one of the main bottlenecks that we are facing. Maybe another one is related to how we assess the credit worthiness. And this is maybe more internal constraint, because now we also, as a financial institution, have to change the way that we assess the project that we receive and include other indicators, other metrics, so that we are sure of the credit worthiness of the project that we're financing, and at the same time that we're complying with criteria sometimes that we have from our donors. So these are maybe the main constraints. Another one that is related to one is the fact that we need to report on what we're financing, to report on the impacts. And this is not something that we're used to do. I mean, when we're financing drip irrigation, for instance, we're not calculating the impact in terms of water economy. When we're financing tree planting, we do not calculate carbon storage, etc., etc. And this is something that we have to integrate now, and it's quite complex to do for a financial institution that doing retail, maybe compared to investors.
And you were just talking about the fact to differentiate your pricing according to the risk and the sustainability actions that they might take. I mean, what are the issues that you're facing when you have to price for sustainability-linked loans? I mean, and to which extent can CGIAR, with their data, their contextual knowledge, could support a bank like yours in this?
Okay, so as an agricultural bank, we're already including a set of information when we're trying to score our project. We already have an agri-scoring tool that we use whenever we have to finance a project. So that includes, for example, water availability, that includes the kind of soil that we're looking at. But what we're missing, and clearly the tool that have been presented is very interesting in this regard, is that we have, with this tool, a long-term vision. And when you're financing long-term investment, it's very important to include that kind of long-term vision. And also the fact that you can compare, maybe you cannot have this kind of, I mean, when we're doing our risk assessment, what's important is not only to say to a farmer, we are not willing to finance you because you are too risky, but on the other way, to say, do not do this kind of investment, you should rather do that one, because we don't want to exclude them from financing. What we want is really to help them transition to new practices, new crops, and new way of doing things. So with that tool, maybe that will help to do that, because you can compare the crops, you can compare the locations, and this is very helpful.
Thank you very much. So, Corey, in the Global Affairs Canada, you have announced that you would double your budget for financing and building its long-term support for climate action, specifically in developing countries. I mean, what are the climate finance funding mechanisms that you are considering to really cope with the complexity of this type of investments?
Well, first I wish we beat Germany in financing this one, because it's certainly an excellent initiative, and I'm glad we can come in through responsAbility. So Canada, yes, has doubled its commitment to climate. So climate has been doubled now to 5.3 billion for these next 5 years, and that comes off of last year, or the previous 5 years, which was 2.65. So the main ways in which we're financing is primarily through concessional finance and then catalytic finance. So we've been really banking, and excuse the pun here, but banking on the ability to bring in the private sector into this development sphere and to achieve impact, not only climate, but also on women and gender and women's empowerment. So some of the ways in which we've been financing is one, through investment-related finance, through funds like responsAbility, where we're directly trying to improve the risk-adjusted return of investments. Another thing that we're looking at is credit guarantees and insurance products that help to de-risk a portfolio overall, and I think this is where hopefully we go more and more. And then, of course, there's technical assistance facilities, and I think that's been mentioned by a number of the panelists, the importance of building capacity, not only at the level of the farmer, but also by the financial institutions in terms of integrating these kinds of risk assessments. And I think the challenge has been to date that a lot of our climate finance isn't reaching the food sector and the agriculture sector, and I think that stat was brought up. And so hopefully with this round, we really can start to see more of that financing going to agriculture and food. But for the variety of risks mentioned, it's just really hard right now to measure. And we know farmers tend to be optimists, but unfortunately bankers aren't. So they need the data out there to help them make decisions. And let's hope something like this will get us there.
And precisely, do you think that we need more on these innovative solutions for sustainable finance, like the Precise Food System Fund? And how would you see your contribution into these innovative solutions?
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of more funds. I think we have enough funds out there. We need equity funds. We need private investment funds in this space. That would, I think, would be new. But I'm currently the chair of the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program. This is a large global fund coordinating grant investments in LDCs around the world. This has been established since 2008, and it's working quite well. And I think a lot of the funds that are out there work well. So it's about using what already works. I think what we do need is more strategic investments that look at systematic barriers to investing in agriculture. So we see a lot of fluctuation and risks come from climate, from commodity price fluctuation, currency. These are the kind of strategic investments I think donors need to start to make. And we know we need to use that dollar even more efficiently. I think the World Bank, I was listening to him saying that, you know, donor money isn't coming in like it used to. So we really need to figure out how do we leverage each dollar more efficiently.
Thank you very much. So Andrew, turning to you now. So the Brothers Earth Fund is targeting transformational system change. What does that mean precisely in the food sector?
Okay, thanks a lot. And before I go into that, just want to say a big congratulations. I mean, I think This is fantastic what we've got with OneSF. A big thank you to Germany as well for getting in there. Too bad Canada. But this is really exactly what I think is needed. And we've heard all week about money commitments not being made. And so, we need to increase the amount of money that's coming, but we also need to make sure that every dollar that we are spending on this is well spent. And this kind of thing basically makes every dollar worth two. And so big congratulations on launching this, and I hope we have a great decade really taking advantage of this. We need more evidence and science and technical expertise into this world. What we do, this question of what is systemic transformational change, I'm sure we could have like several PhD students work on that and come up with several answers. But really, this is an example, just to answer it in very simple terms, changing the way we go about things and doing things very differently. And it was really kind of, this morning, we launched this thing called the Systems Change Lab. And that's where we're looking at kind of 50 things that fundamentally need to change in the world, that we need to transform if we are going to meet climate goals. And see, so in all of those 50, basically the result is we're well off track in most of these big changes that we need. And so incremental, the business as usual, the way of doing things incrementally is just not going to deliver the pace of change that we need. And so you really need to be thinking about much more systemic transformational changes. And so that's really where we come at. And one example on that is that we need to increase 10 times faster the amount of climate finance that we're deploying. And so this is a great example. Maybe with this kind of approach, we only need to do it 5 times faster because it's going to be more effective.
Thank you. And what do you intend to do concretely to leverage financing for the food system, and in particular, and also for the science-based approaches? What is your strategy regarding this?
Right, so we're different to everyone else on the panel here. We're in philanthropy. We're not in investors or anything like that. In philanthropy, I think actually plays a very important complementary role to sustainable finance world. What we have the opportunity is to be quite flexible, quite quick in deploying funds. We can take more risks. And I think if we do our job right, what it should be doing is taking away some of the barriers for then the finance to come in and roll in. So that's our interest certainly in the sustainable finance space of how can we bring some of these new opportunities onto the table for it. And I think the fund is very interesting in the sense that it's one of the few funds that I've seen that moves beyond just farms or hectares of restoration or improved practices or whatever. It is looking at the food system. And I'm sure what you're going to find is it's a lot harder to make those investments as well. And so, hopefully the kinds of things that we're interested in doing is helping bring down the barriers for those kinds of investments to happen, be it through monitoring and MRV kind of systems, get much better at monitoring, for example, through satellites, methane, so we can track sustainable livestock, things like that. And so that's the role potentially, I think, of this in this kind of spectrum of finance that can come in.
Thank you very much. So we still have a few minutes for some questions, if any, from the public. Any questions for, yes?
First of all, I just want to say congratulations. This is awesome. Very awesome. My name is Erin Fitzgerald. I'm with U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action. So I guess one of the questions I have is, how are you working directly with the producers to give you real-time feedback on financial mechanisms that work?
That's what we've been doing since 60 years. So we work directly with them. For sustainable finance, what I've been saying is that you really need to engage with them. You need to go to them, meet with them, try to convince, talk about what they can do, what other solutions they can have. For instance, what we have noticed this year is because the price of energy is getting very high, a lot of farms are now interested in direct seedling. Well, we've been trying to promote this technology and practice for years. Now, because of the prices are higher, energy prices are higher, farmers are more willing to adopt this practice. And the same for example, in renewable energy and energy efficiency in farms. This is something that we're noticing. But as long as you need to integrate new technologies, you need to help them choose the right one. And this is where technical assistance is important, because they don't know the difference between pump A, pump B, panel, solar panel of this brand and this other brand. And they don't know how to choose. They just see that the price is different. So why should I choose this one, not that one? So we need to help them to choose the right one. And we need from our side also to calculate the impact of this investment to make sure that they will get more revenue for them, and that the credit worthiness would be good for giving them a loan. And at the same time, if we want to incentivize this loan, we need also to prove to our donors that they're having the good impact.
Any other questions? Or maybe we can also have a few questions during the drink, which would be maybe a little bit more friendly. Yes. So to conclude, so thank you very much to the panelists for their very nice contribution, and to the people having also presented today. So as a concluding remark, coming myself from the financial industry, where we indeed need a lot of capital flows being redirected into the food system, I think that I remain personally very positive, because I see that there is strong incentives now coming on from the financial industry for them to move. I don't know whether you heard about, for instance, the impact-weighted assets. So now there is a debate going on that assets would be valorized or devalorized according to the impacts that an institution would have on natural capital. If we succeed in putting the natural capital at the same level as the financial capital, that would be a key driver for immediate changes through the entire value chain of the food system. So I'm very positive about this initiative. I'm very positive if we succeed in connecting the dots between the very end of the value chain spectrum, the financial institutions, and the farmers, thanks to organizations like CGIAR, who have now clearly understood how important it is to make sure that they listen to the market demand and they tailor very customized solutions for the benefits of all actors of the value chain. And if we succeed in doing this, this would be a win-win situation for everybody and in a very short time frame. So I'm very positive when I see this very good presentation and initiatives, and bravo, congratulations to CGIAR for having set up this OneSF Hub. So I welcome you now for the drink. Thank you very much for your attention.